Hey there, welcome to my version of the Addi Bear Lovey, and a huge shout out to A Crafty Concept with their Addi Bear tutorial that I was able to base this one off of. I'm going to go ahead and get started with the cream color yarn that I used, and this is going to be for the inside head of our Lovey. I do the inside head because it helps with the stuffing not showing through, so I always do an inside head and then the outside head and body will come next. So first we're going to cast on and then do 6 rows of that cream color yarn, and then we're going to change and go into the brown color that you see over there to the left of the machine. And whenever I change colors, I like to go ahead and tie it off right away. I know many people wait until the end, or they wait until they've done a couple of rounds. But for me, I like to just go ahead and tie it off right away. After I have reached another 10 rows with the brown, so that's 6 white, 10 brown for a total of 16, I'm going to go ahead and cast off, and I'm going to cast straight off the machine without waste yarn, since these will be cinched at both ends. If you'll notice, I like to put my index fingers into the slots where I am pulling it off of the machine. This just gives me a little bit extra security whenever I'm pulling it off, so that I'm not having drop stitches along the way. I'm then going to go ahead and kind of stretch it out and set it to the side. And now I am ready to go ahead and get started with the head and body of my Lovey. And that is also going to follow the exact same pattern so far. It's going to be a total of 6 white rows, or the cream color rows. And then I will follow it up again with the 10 of the brown. From top to bottom, your entire Lovey will be 60 rows. Some people like to reset the counter in between every color. I tend not to have to reset my counter between every single color. So once I'm done with the white, you will continue on with the brown until your row counter hits 16. Whenever you get to 16, this is a really important part of the Lovey. You're going to go ahead and stop once you have hit that point, and we're going to insert the exact same color brown that we're using for the head and body, and this is what I call the cinch yarn. So we're going to use that after we're done in order to cinch our bear together, and that way it will be the differential between the neck and the body. I'm then going to take, in order to do that, I'm going to take my working yarn and I'm going to place all of that inside the inner circle of the Addi. Just like we're doing a color change, we're just not cutting the thread. And so, like I said, I'm going to take that same color yarn, usually a couple of yards just for safe measure to make sure that I've got enough. And I'm going to insert that in. Just like a color change, you're just not tying it off. And then we're going to go all the way around one full rotation. So that should put our row counter at 17 at this point. Once we've gotten to that point, again, it's going to be just like a color change. We're going to insert that brown free yarn into the inside of the machine, and we're going to take our working yarn and we're going to pull it back to the outside of the machine, just like a normal change would be, and we're going to go an additional 43 rows, or until our row counter hits 60. On this part of the step, I do like to use waste yarn for specifically because of how the bottom is finished. I prefer waste yarn if I'm trying to keep something really square or the edges are going to show. I just like the finish of it a little bit better. I don't use waste yarn on a lot of items if I don't feel like it's necessary. So you're going to get a opposing color, and you're going to put that onto the machine and roll a few rows down. And then you're ready to come off the machine. I set it out, stretch it just a bit to make sure everything looks good. And I set it off to the side as well with the head of the monkey. I'm then going to move to my small Addi with the 22 pins, and we're going to work on the arms. So we're going to take that same cream color and we are going to cast on. With the 22 needle, I usually cast on a little bit slower. A lot of times you've got to make sure that that very first round doesn't have really any tension on it. And for this section, we're going to do a total of 20 rounds, and the first 7 rounds will be that cream color, and then we're going to do an additional 13 in the brown. So that's what I'm doing right here, is I'm doing the color change, and I'm going to do 13 additional brown rows. Again, 20 total. I had a little drop stitch there, so I fixed that right quick before I moved on. And again, I'm going to cast off regular on this one. I'm not going to use waste yarn because the edges aren't going to be seen. And so it's not really anything that I need a great finish on. So I'm going to go ahead and cast off. Again, I do the same thing with the 22. I try to kind of put my finger over the next peg because I hear a lot of people talking about drop stitches and they're always afraid to do it this way. So in my opinion, it can save time if there's not a need for the waste yarn. Now that that one is done, I'm going to give it a little tug, the same, kind of pull my cream, make sure that it looks like it's good to go. And again, we're just kind of rocking out the tubes right now, and I'm going to go ahead and do the second arm and get it ready as well. You're going to follow the exact same pattern for the second arm. Again, you'll do 7 of the cream rows and 13 of the brown for 20 total. I really wanted to figure out, I know that the original Addi Bear YouTube video that I had watched showed that the arms and the face area had crochet, and I saw several people that were commenting on different forums that they weren't sure how to crochet, or it was intimidating to them. So I really wanted to figure out a way that I could utilize the 22 needle and see if I could make it work. I know that the I-cord would be a bit small, but the way that I do the arms with the 22 seems to work out great. The next thing that we're going to do is work on the monkey ears, and this is a quick cast on, and we are going to do 7 brown rows with the brown yarn. And then on this one, I do like to use waste yarn. I will put the waste yarn on. Again, I went a little too quick there. I had a couple of stitches that tried to drop on me, so I fixed those right quick. But we'll do the 7 rows, and then I do like to do the waste yarn on this one, mainly just because you can see it. It's right on the outside of the head, and again, it just gives it a little bit cleaner finish. And the tube is such a short tube that we're making work for this, so the waste yarn kind of gives you a little bit of extra to work with. Once I get the waste yarn all on, I will just pull it off of the machine, and then I will do the other ear exactly the same way. Once it's off, I kind of roll it around, give it a little tug, make sure that we're all good, and then let's move on to the next one. Again, we're going to do the exact same thing with this one as we did on the other one. And I just want to encourage everyone to use your imagination with these loveys. They're a lot of fun. There's a lot of different animals you can make with them. And just have a good time. So the next part that we're going to do is the monkey's face. And we are going to go back in with that cream color. And we're going to do 4 rows of the cream. Then we're going to do 3 rows of the red color. And then we're going to end with 4 more rows of cream. Again, on this, I'm not using waste yarn. I'm just going to do a quick cast off. Same thing. We're going to be cinching the ends so the edges aren't anything that are going to be seen on these. I do want to add, a lot of people too, they will do their cast on row as row 1. I typically don't ever do that. I do 1 full cast on, and then I set my counter to 0 also. Not that that's going to make a huge difference in your work, but something like for the muzzle or the ears where you're working with much smaller pieces, it could make a difference or make your work look a little bit unbalanced. So I'm going to cut off those excess strings there before I move on. Make sure that my knots are good and tight. Stretch it out, just kind of look at it, make sure everything is good to go on there. And we are nearing time for assembly, which is super exciting to get to see this little guy come to life. So I had tried a couple different ways with the muzzle. So this is me kind of playing around with it before I got one that I was happy with. I did a couple of muzzles off camera, and they just didn't turn out quite as nice. This one turned out great. The only thing that I didn't love about it was I didn't like the fact that towards the edges, the red line almost seemed to get a little bit bigger. So I took my edges on this and cinched it. You can see there I'm kind of pinching them together, trying to get some ideas together on how I'm going to make that work. And I just go in with some cream thread and I cinch those down so that whenever you're looking at it from the side, I don't know that it really makes that big of a difference, but I liked the look better of it by cinching those sides down. I'm still kind of playing with it, seeing if that's what I want to do or not. And at the end of the day, I put the 2 monkeys up side by side that I had done with a different muzzle, and while the other one is fine, I do like the finish of this one a little bit better, so that is what I decided to go with. Looks like I had a little extra string tucked there. Grabbed that with my crochet hook. And I just make sure that both sides look pretty good and they have that white edge all the way around. And that's kind of the look that I was going for whenever I was trying to get these figured out. So I'm happy with that end result now. And I'm just going to go ahead and get that tied off. I'm just taking a little extra time in this area and making sure that anything that's pulled or tucked or looks a little bit funny, I'm taking just the extra time to make sure that that's tucked in where it needs to be before I go over to finish off the other side. I'm going to go ahead and cut off any of the excess and just kind of tuck it in. And then, like I said, I'm moving over to the other side and going to work on that side so that it can look pretty similar and have that wide edge just like the first side did. Once I have that all good to go, I'm ready to tie off. And this part will be ready to attach to our monkey face. So whenever you stretch it out, you can see it's going to have that look that you're going for. And it looks pretty good on the finished result. So we're going to go ahead and look at all of our pieces. We've got the mouth, the head body, the inner head, both of the arms, both of the ears, and we're ready to start assembling. So we're first going to start with the body, and this is the waist yarn, and this is what I do whenever I'm using waist yarn. I find that center hole area, and then I start counting, and the Addi is 46 needles, so I'm going to count 23 in. And once I get to 23, that's going to give me the center start point on the opposite side so that as I crochet down, it's going to be perfect to end on the other side with the tail so that your tail will create your knot. So once I have made it to that 23, I use my crochet hook. And then I just start crocheting single into each one of those stitches that I pick up. Some people do waist yarn and they still use a regular needle. That's fine as well. I just find it easier myself to do it with the crochet hook. I just also really love the way that it finishes off the edge. It looks very well done and put together, and it works great for me on my straight edges. It's a good idea to count as you go as well as you go down through there, making sure that you've picked up all 46 stitches so that you don't go to pull your waist yarn and then you have a drop stitch. So speed up through that process and work my way all the way to the other edge. And as I get there, it works out just right, and then I'm able to take that tail and tie it off and remove my waist yarn, and that should give me a pretty great finished rectangle at the bottom. I'm going to take that extra yarn, put it inside, and cut it off. Now we are ready to use that cinch yarn that I was talking about earlier. When you go in, you're going to find those two really long tails. Kind of fold down your work about where it is just so that you can work with it a little bit easier. And you're going to start gently pulling. You don't want to pull so hard that you break that yarn. And this center cinch that you're going to do here, you're going to still have a pretty significant hole in the bottom, and that's fine. You just don't want your head to be able to go through. And whenever you cinch it, you can see that there's no way that internal head would be able to go through. I just tie it off, cut off my excess, and then I am now ready to place the polyfilled head on the inside. I cut off any extra strings there, and I go ahead and kind of get that ready and adjust it a little bit for the internal head. Here I cinched both ends of that internal head, and I am working through knotting the bottom, and then at the top of it I'm going to start putting my polyfill in. I like mine to be a pretty firm head, but not so firm that you can't squeeze it. But I also know that after a while, polyfill tends to get a little bit flat, so I like to fill mine pretty good. And if you notice, I still have a circle there, but what I'd like to do whenever I'm finishing off even hats and things like that is I start picking up a few stitches in that circle and cinch until it continually just gets a little bit smaller. So I'm also going to line up, whenever I'm inserting the head into the body and head, I'm going to line up that little area where I started, where the rows switch around. And you can see it there. I've got my thumb right near it. And I'm going to line it up kind of with the other outside head. Probably would not show through, but I'm pretty particular, and I like to try to make it match up as good as possible. You saw me kind of working with the head in there and trying to make sure that my lines were pretty close to the same where the white and the brown are. I'll manipulate it a little bit more. And then as I cinch this, I kind of do the same thing. I start taking that yarn and working it into a few of those threads in that center, and can continue working and around until I get it all the way closed. And then I am ready to knot off and insert that in and cut off my excess. Once that's done, I am ready to move to the little ears. That's usually where I like to start on this, just so that I can be symmetrical. I've got my working yarn there with my waste yarn, and that's where I'm going to find that hole. I'm going to go down 11 on this one since it's with the 22 pin, and I do the exact same process. I'm going to count all 22 as I crochet them in, and then I'll use that working yarn that's left out of the brown to finalize my little knot on the end, and then remove the waste yarn. At this point, I am good to go ahead and cinch the top of it so that you can start closing that ear down. And you'll see how I do the ear here. I'm actually going to fold it in half because it would be way too wide to leave the full width of it, which is how I also do the arms. So I'm going to cinch that in and then thread my needle, and I will be folding this over, as you can see here. And then I will just work my needle first through the loop just to kind of snug everything and get it secure, and then I'll work it all the way down that edge, and then it will be down there where it's ready to attach to your Lovey. I'll do the exact same thing with the other ear, and they'll both be ready to go. Now on this one, I've also took a little bit of extra time. It didn't take long, but I took a little bit of extra time, and I worked my way around the inside of the ear just so that it would almost give like a little rim around the outside of the ear. It worked out good. I don't know that it's necessary, but I did do that, and I like the result of how that finished off. So that is what I'm doing here, tying that off and then getting ready to start in on that little rim of the ear. Again, a lot of the process is just a little bit of trial and error and trying to figure out how to make things. You can actually do quite a bit of shaping and things like that with just the needle and yarn, and make a lot of things look different and work well for different animals that you're going to do. You can see there, that's where I used the needle to get everything shaped how I liked it. And again, with the second ear, we're following the exact same steps as we did on the first one. And working through that waist yarn, crocheting those ends together, then using our tail to tie that off before we remove all of our waist yarn. I now look at them and just kind of see where I'm at, making sure that the size looks about the same, stretching them when I need to, kind of pulling into that shape. As you can see, that second one was much faster than the first one because I kind of had a plan together at that point. So I set those off to the side, and we're going to go ahead and move to the arms. We're going to do them very similar to how we did the ears, as far as we're going to cinch that white end where the hand would be. We're going to cinch that pretty snug, and then we're going to fold these over, and then we're going to seam down the arm up to the part where it joins the body. And as you can see, once we do that, it makes a pretty great size arm, and it's not, you know, full of stuffing. However, it's got an extra layer in there, so it's got a little bit of extra padding to it, which is nice, I think. Looks like I had a missed stitch there, so I pulled that out so that I could start it over like I liked it. And I also kind of did a mattress stitch on this section here too, so that whenever I went to the brown, that it wouldn't show through as I worked down through with the white. And it worked out well, how I did it. You just kind of have to turn it in there. I think actually that was probably what I went back and did there on the video, was pulled it so that it would be more like a mattress stitch. You just kind of have to go back and forth to each side, and then whenever you pull them together, they round out really nicely. Go ahead and tie that end off, and you are ready to attach that one. So let's go ahead and move to the second arm. Again, the same thing. We're going to cinch that end, and we are going to work our way down the arm in a mattress stitch so that that white or cream color won't be seen with the brown. And then once we get down there to that edge, we'll tie that off, and it will be ready to attach to the body as well. I think I said it earlier in the video, but I like to start with the ears just because I can get a really symmetrical line there. And also where I put my ears, especially if there's a color change, you're able to hide that, and you're right on the edge also for where your body and arms need to line up. So I'm going to look and see where I want to position that ear onto the monkey's head. And then I'm just going to take a little bit of time and carefully attach it to each side. Also for this one, I tried to put a little bit of curve in the ear, so you can use needles to hold it down. I just generally eyeball it, but I put the curve in the ear. It's a little bit hard to see in the video, but I did put a little bit of curve to it so that it looks really good with that little brim edge that I ended up doing. So once I get it where I want it, I go ahead and tie it off. Look at it, make sure it's good, and then I'm ready to add the other side. I try to just, with the sock monkey, just go completely opposite side there. And again, trying to curve that ear just a little bit and attach it to the head so that it gives a little dip in that ear. Once I get that done, I'm ready to tie off. And we'll be ready to move on to the mouth of the monkey. So just pulling it back out, looking, stretching, making sure everything's how I want it. I did use a little bit of polyfill for this once I started getting it attached to the face, but just trying to figure out where I want it on the face and how stretched or how cinched that center needs to be. And a lot of this is going to be personal preference. Again, use a little bit of imagination. There's many different options that you can do for the little face, but this is what worked well for me. So once I think that I'm shaped about like I want it, I'm going to go ahead and start threading it onto the monkey's face. I started working on the top first, and try to kind of do there in the center just so that I could make sure that I was staying as symmetrical as possible. Sorry I pulled the monkey out of the view for a little bit, but once I get the top area secure, I go ahead and secure one side of the bottom section. And then at that point, I leave a little bit of a gap there so that I can fill that muzzle in, just so that it fills it out nicely. And then I'm ready to go ahead and go around and finish off all of the edges. I almost ran out of thread right there, but I made it work. And then you will tie that off and be ready to finish out the other side. And then once we've got all of the white area attached, we're going to go ahead and add the black line for the center of the monkey's mouth. And this is just a pretty simple process. You're just going to embroider that through. I had some red thread showing through right there, so I tucked that back in. But I do just a simple stitch and go back around so that it makes a full straight line. I did go over and do a second swipe with the thread just to get it to the consistency that I liked it. And once you're finished with that mouth part, you are ready to tie off. Generally, I don't snip this right there. I would typically go ahead and go right into the eyes, but I forgot what I was doing apparently, so I did snip that and then realized, oh, I needed to do the eyes. So I will go back in and grab some more black thread, and then we'll do the eyes. Now, I do the eyes pretty simple. I double my yarn here and just basically do a couple of squares on each side. I think that I probably did maybe 3 thread widths, maybe 4. Just kind of eyeball it, see what looks good. Again, I say use your imagination, use your creativity. Some people use buttons or things like that on their sock monkeys. However, with this being for a baby, I didn't want to use anything like that that could be pulled off. So I just stuck with the embroidering the eyes on. Get it to where you think you like it, and then go ahead and move on to the second side. And our sock monkey is almost finished, and he's really coming together, looking really super cute. Now that I have this side about like I like it, I'm going to go ahead and tie that off. That way it has less chance of coming loose. I know some people will just go ahead and go on into the other side at this point. I prefer to kind of knot it off in between. Again, you're just going to kind of eyeball it, try to get them symmetrical, and then tie it off once you're finished, and you're going to tuck in those extra threads and cut off the excess. Now to attach the arms, what I generally do on these, I don't like to do them fully back as far as the ears are, so I just set them slightly forward, just a little bit, so that they will lay better whenever the sock monkey is laying down. And you're just going to go into that neck area up as close as you possibly can, and you're going to attach those in that area. And that is all that you have left as far as assembling the body of your monkey. Now I am going to add the red on the top, and the way that I do that, I personally don't like to use a pom-pom, just because again it's going to a child, and I'm always afraid. I feel like my ends of the poms always come loose, and I lose threads one by one. So I started with a latch hook. I decided that wasn't the best method, but I cut about 25 strings of the red yarn, and I ended up just threading them and going through. And what I did was I threaded each one and tied them in triple knots to make sure that they don't come undone. And I just followed a very tight pattern on the inside of that center circle at the very top of the head. And I did that until I had used all of my string up. And then at that point, you're ready to trim it up. It's not going to stand up very good while it's so long. So while you're trying to make sure that your circle looks good and that you're leaving that symmetrical, you see me often picking that up and just kind of looking at it, making sure that my circle is staying pretty good. Again, it doesn't have to be exact, but I do like for it to be as finished as well as possible. So once I'm happy with about the amount of thickness that I have there, I'm going to go ahead and pull that up, and it's ready to cut. And again, I would always start a little bit longer than what you think you need and go back and cut a little extra, because you can't go back and add back in. Now I'm going to add my tag for my Lovey, and I'm going to use red thread just because it's cute for this. And my sock monkey Lovey is complete. I hope that you guys have enjoyed this. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. And again, I will put the color thread that I used. I love this yarn from Hobby Lobby, but I will put the exact colors in the description below the video.